Now, these are statistics based on the surveys of adult children of sex addicts. Now, if your children are younger, they might not be here yet, but it'd be good to know what could be ahead of them and to maybe strengthen to make sure that doesn't happen for them, or at least try. I mean, human beings make their own decisions, and if your children decide to medicate in some way because of living in a dysfunctional system, they will make different choices. One might become, super responsible. One might be a drug addict. One might be a sex addict. One might have intimacy and anorexia issues. They might make all kinds of choices. You're going to have to let them make those choices. But let me tell you what some of the things that we have found. Depression. Now, depression is, having low energy, difficulty concentrating, worthless feeling, maybe gaining or losing weight, difficulty sleeping. Depression has its own symptoms, and 62% of adult children said they struggled with depression. That's astronomical. Okay? So if you see that your adult child is struggling with depression, it may be because of what's happened with them. Now, it also could be anything from hormones. It could be low levels of other things, hormones and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that their thyroid's okay before you jump to the conclusion it's because mom or because dad was a sex addict. Okay, eating disorders, 38%. And I would say, generally speaking, my clinical experiences, women tend to struggle more with the eating disorder side than the men do. 57% said that being an adult child of a sex addict affected their sexual choices. And that's a big number as well. And so your adult children might be making poor choices. And you got to understand, when you're living with an addiction, alcohol, drugs, sex, food, work, whatever it is, that parent is not maturing spiritually, emotionally, or morally. And so they can't really convey adult values because they're not living them by their anger, by their emotional outbursts, by their inability to make decisions well, not being able to think of consequences. They're generally in the early adolescent stage of development. So your children were raised by at least one child and sometimes two. You have to look at your own issues and see if you're bringing addictions to the table as well. Now, 64% said it affects their sexual beliefs, what they believe about sexuality. Now, of course, some of these children have been exposed to pornography and think that that's what sex is. It's sex without relationship. And so depending on what kind of information they have, and we have videos on that for teenagers to watch to help them with that. But this impacted them. Also, it affected their romantic relationships, kind of who they chose just to kind of be in relationship with. And again, 64% said it affected them that way. Now, some of them, 17%, said it affected them kind of in a sexual anorexic way, where they didn't want to have sex. All right, and that's also a possibility because of the meaning of all this pain that has happened around because of the sexuality of the out-of-control spouse. Now, 69% says it affects their marital relationships. Well, that makes sense, right? Because they're seeing a marital system based on addiction, whether it was sex addiction or alcohol or overeating or nicotine. It really wouldn't matter if it's gambling. They're seeing a marital system that's trying to function with an addiction, which it has to only can be dysfunctional. So it affects that. 41% said it affects the way they parent. If you are being raised by an emotional adult, oftentimes they're not forward thinking in their finances about savings and investments and retirements and college funds and educating your children about being physically responsible. Because often addicts have challenges in those areas. Now, this is a big one. Self-esteem, how they felt about themselves. When I see the number 81%, that speaks to me of causality. That the addiction had a significant cause and impact on how the adult woman or man felt about themselves. They probably didn't feel as equipped. They probably felt different. They probably had all kinds of stuff they had to deal with a sexual addiction. And so their self-esteem was affected, 81%. Likewise, 79% said it affected their spirituality, their concept of God, their view of religion. I mean, imagine if your dad was a deacon or some kind of religious figure, or your mom was a pastor or some kind of religious figure, and you find out that they're a sex addict. How confusing. I'll never forget, true story. I did a TV show for a huge Christian ministry on sexual addiction. And there was a guy watching this show in Florida who just finished producing his first national porn magazine, and he had him in a big storage unit ready to be shipped out next week. Well, he got so convicted by what we were sharing, he got saved, gave his heart to Jesus, okay, and he destroyed his pornography. But his story was one where he was a pastor's kid, and his dad had pornography and affairs. So you could see how that affected his spirituality, okay? Emotionally, 70% felt emotionally impacted. Now, on that, I want to give you something that you can help your kids with. And it's a book called Emotional Fitness in 60 Days. This thing's powerful because it can help you help your children to learn how to identify their feelings, communicate their feelings, feel their feelings, and switch their feelings so they're not being controlled and dominated by their feelings. Such an important thing, because most children of addicts feel emotionally underdeveloped, because they are. They don't know how to share feelings. They've not seen it role modeled. They've seen anger. They've seen sadness. They've seen insanity. But rarely have they thought of a conversation where mom or dad was like, I feel this, or I feel that, or feeling this, and this is what's going on with me. That didn't happen. So, socially, 71% felt it affected them socially. Who they hung out with, how they hung out with, what peers they chose. Again, if they don't feel good about themselves, going back to self-esteem, they're not going to pick peers that make them feel good about themselves. That would be in conflict. Dating, 71% said it affected their dating relationships. Okay, again, who they chose, why they were dating. Were they dating out of need, want? Were they dating with the purpose of connection or conquering? Okay, whether they be male or female. 69% said it affected their marriage. And again, if you don't have tools growing up, you might not have tools going into the situation. On that, we have so many marriage books. If your children are contemplating marriage or they already are married, lots of materials there that can be helpful. Morally, 67% said it affected their moral decisions, their ability to discern right and wrong, and actually going with what's right. So their morality was impacted. And lastly, 45% said finances were impacted by living and growing up in a home of a sex addict.